Welcome to Spiritual Spectrum, the show where we cover religious topics of many descriptions. Tonight's topic is non-theistic religions, and where we have with us a number of guests. Vance, would you like to introduce them?
Yeah, our first guest is Wong. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a director of Feng Lai Gok Taoist Temple. I also translate Taoist texts. I'm currently on the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization Commission on the World Religions, a project whose goal is to translate the religious texts of the world from the perspectives of the religions themselves.
Very interesting.
John Avery?
Hello, my name is John Avery. I'm a philosophy and religion instructor here in Denver. I call myself a religious humanist. Religious humanist is not a member of any particular church. There is no church in the Yellow Pages called religious humanism. It's a philosophical and religious orientation. I have just finished a book with a Muslim called Towards a Spiritual Humanism, in which we dialogue about Muslim and humanist ideas and values.
And our next guest is Alex Halpern.
I am a director of the Vajradhatu Buddhist Church, which is an international organization of Tibetan Buddhist churches in the Vajrayana tradition, and live in Boulder, where one of our centers is located. We also have a center here in Denver, I should add.
Interesting. Okay.
Can you give us kind of an idea about how your particular forms of belief came into being?
Well, first of all, Taoism is a tradition that dates back to 600 years before the Common Era, and it is generally attributed to the philosopher Lao Tzu. This particular philosophical system has undergone over 2,000 years of history of development, adding to its spiritual heritage teachers, sages, throughout that period of development in China. And basically what we have now in modern-day Taoism is a culmination of the work, the experience, the practice of many people.
John?
Religious humanism is a distinctive Midwestern American form of religious life and thought. It originated at the turn of the century at the University of Chicago and the University of Michigan under the inspiration of the American philosopher John Dewey. Basically, what these professors were trying to do is reform the Christian religion in particular to bring its metaphysics up to date with natural science and the theories of evolution, and to bring up the political structure of the Christian church up to date and make it more democratic. But some people might claim that humanism goes back to the very first human being who evolved 2 million years ago, who decided that he or she would have to use intelligence to solve problems rather than pray to some deity. Though I think we might be able to trace religious humanism back to Socrates in the West, though I would like to think that religious humanism can be traced back to Lao Tzu and the Buddha as well.
Well, Buddhism derives its name from the historical Buddha who lived in India about 2,500 years ago. Since that time, it has spread and flourished throughout all of the countries in Asia, finding particular expressions in northern India, China, Japan, and Tibet, and also is very popular or largely followed in Southeast Asia in these days. The particular school of Buddhism that I'm a member of is a Tibetan Buddhist organization that stemmed from the Tibetan, well, in 1957 when Tibet was overrun by the Chinese, a great number of Tibetan lamas moved to the West by force, and some of them came to the United States, including our founder, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and 20 years ago. And so we have since developed in the West and have become part of that stream of Buddhism that's been finding a home in North America and in Europe really over the course of the last 30 years.
None of your particular forms of belief involve a belief in a deity or deities, or does it? Anyone want to go?
Well, within Taoism, we have ideals, and ideals are represented and symbolized by Taoist sages, immortals we call them. Sometimes we actually call these persons as deities, but I think when we talk about deity within the Taoist tradition, we're looking at a symbol of a particular ideal, for example, of wisdom or compassion or virtue, selflessness, honor. And these ideals are part of ourselves. In a very, even in a very simplistic way, we may say that the deities are really parts of us. They are the ideal parts of ourselves that have not been realized, so therefore we project them out as concrete images so that we have a better idea of what they are, what they represent, and what pathways that they have tread, and they become models for us to follow. So in a way that Taoism is non-theistic, in the way that because we don't see these deities as supreme beings that we look outside of ourselves, but we see them as embodied within us.
In that sense, would it almost focus on the archetypical or the archetypical nature of these deities, as Jung was looking at the archetypes within the human psyche? Is this a similar concept?
Well, I don't think that we would actually call them archetypes, because they're not part of both the personal consciousness or unconsciousness or the collective. They just simply represent universal ideals that we have valued, or we value, and that certain sages, immortals in the past have been instrumental in teaching these ideals, and therefore we respect them and make them our models. So in that sense, they are really not archetypes, because they're not resident in our consciousness.
Okay.
John or Alex, do you want to respond to my question?
Religious humanism doesn't really take a stand directly on whether there are deities or not. So we're probably agnostic ultimately. However, in terms of practice, we live our lives without any kind of belief in deities or gods. And as a general rule, deities are thought to be part of an ancient kind of metaphysics that has come down from the past, where gods were used to explain natural phenomena. But with the advent of the scientific revolution in 17th century Europe, we have started to understand a little bit more about the natural world, and so the idea of a god creating things or making things happen is considered to be scientifically obsolete. John Dewey in the 1930s gave some lectures at Yale University where he talked about the idea of God as a symbol for ideal ends, much like Eva mentioned here a moment ago. And so he said that people could still, as far as science or democracy is concerned, hold on to the idea of gods or deities because they do symbolize ideal ends like wisdom that Eva mentioned, and they can guide and inspire human beings to achieve those kinds of ideals.
Some of our viewers might hear in what you're saying, and to some extent in what you're saying, that these things do represent something that is in a way almost just psychologic, but I don't really understand you to be saying that. Are you saying that there's a greater reality to this? And do you want to maybe respond from your point of view to Vance's question? And you think about that a little bit. I can hear a lot of people, or I can imagine a lot of people wondering, what you're saying seems like, oh, God's a great psychological concept, especially as an ideal, but where's the reality? Where's the substance? Maybe you could respond to that.
From our perspective, non-theism is not regarded as a negation, but it's actually a very important affirmation and a very profound subject within the the Buddhist tradition. In particular, the emphasis there is on the idea, and when I say non-theism, what I refer to is the absence of a savior principle, of an external savior. And that's the critical component there, which is a somewhat different angle from what John and Eva were describing, which I agree with, those perceptions. But in our case, the notion of non-theism is a very strong affirmation of the importance of personal practice and working with one's own mind as a path towards understanding what we refer to as awake mind, or one's basic nature, that has, and that in that context the reliance on an external savior is sort of falls in the imaginary context that John is describing, and the issue doesn't come up because it turns out to be unnecessary.
Well, under these conditions, if you don't believe in a god or gods, would you consider yourself consider these stands as religious or philosophical? Any of you?
Well, actually, I would like to address the idea of the reality, whether indeed these deities have any reality other than what is in our consciousness. I think, Andre, you brought up that point, or that question.
Yes.
I think that within the Taoist point of view is that a psychological reality is a very real reality.
In fact, it's the only one.
It's the only one. And so just to say that something is part of consciousness or projected as an image, it doesn't take away the nature of reality from it, so that we see it even as something that serves a psychological purpose. It is still a very concrete reality as far as we are concerned. We don't give any priority to reality which is like the chair we touch. We give just as high a priority to consciousness phenomena such as dreams, such as thinking. And when we believe that these are images, well, as far as we're concerned, that is reality in its own right.
Well, it's an interesting point, because it brings up in my mind, if this is a higher reality, if consciousness is a higher reality than what is typically described as corporeal or physical reality, then is there within your belief or your philosophy of the universe a highest reality? And if there is, what is that highest reality? And if each of you could answer in turn.
Well, from the Taoist point of view, the ultimate reality is the reality that is grasped without any kind of conscious interception. It is a reality that is grasped without a duality of the thinking, sensing, feeling subject and that which is in the world. To put it in a very short way, any direct experience is the ultimate reality. And we don't stand apart and say, well, there's one reality, and we all kind of like get to it, rather like a Platonic kind of eidos. But what we say is that any person's own experience with these intervention of a cognizing mind, a mind that separates itself from the experience itself, is the highest domain of reality.
John?
I'd like to go back to the first question that Eva addressed a moment ago about the reality of these symbols of deities, and then move to this next question about some highest principle or reality. The idea of God is, to a religious humanist, a creation of the mind, and in a Western sense, it is considered to be imaginary. John Dewey said that we could think of it as a symbol for these ideal ends in human life, in human experience, but he thought that that was only a kind of transitional stage. Some of the other thinkers, like Professor Roy Wood Sellers at the University of Michigan in the 1920s, thought that religion should come of age. Christianity, Judaism, Western religion should come of age and drop these imaginary beings and seek self-reliance, seek the use of intelligence, seek democratic and humanistic values together, and to do it without any kind of illusions about how the world came to be or the end of all things, but try to face things with a realistic, rationalistic, and scientific approach. Now, Eva had said that the ultimate reality in Taoism is beyond reason. This is a point of controversy in the humanist philosophy. Some humanists think that reason is our only tool, our only method for discerning reality, and that's scientific reason. And then others, like another professor at the University of Chicago, Albert Eustace Hayden, from the 1920s and 30s, thought that ultimately reality was the universe as it is naturally perceived and experienced, and our reason and our human experience is an expression of this ultimate principle. What's the ultimate principle? The natural cosmos is studied by science. There isn't anything beyond the natural physical cosmos as studied by the sciences. How do we understand this? We understand it through reason, though there's room for feeling, creativity, and intuition through the practice of the arts and through our emotions.
Now you're saying that this is part of humanism or religious humanism again?
It's part of religious humanism.
Okay.
Humanism, as distinct from religious humanism, probably puts its emphasis only on scientific reason and doesn't make room for intuition, feeling, and the arts.
Okay. Alex?
I was interested that you posed your question in terms of the duality between the corporeal universe and the ultimate reality, which is a fundamentally theistic posture.
Hmm.
From the point of view of non-theism, that dualism is purely imaginary.
Okay.
It doesn't exist. And we wouldn't make that contrast. From our point of view, issues such as ultimate reality and so forth are experiential and, like Eva's, I think somewhat similar to what Eva's describing, essentially ungraspable by the reasoning mind, by process of rationalization, because the process of rationalization in itself involves a split between the subject and the object.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot realize it, you can only hypothesize around it.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it's only when that split is overcome, which by its nature can't be done by mind, by thinking mind. It's only when that occurs that one has the experience of awake mind. And so, from our perspective, describing reality, describing ultimates, describing creation, describing whatever, is subsumed within the more important issue of the path, or of the practitioner, and the individual journey towards increased awareness, and ultimately towards the same mind as the Buddha mind.
Okay.
Do you believe in nirvana or in an afterlife? Any of the three of you?
There's two different questions.
Okay. So clarify what.
For nirvana, it means peace, and it means from our perspective again, it means the opposite of the struggle of ordinary life, and so it's as a teaching tool. When people are unhappy and having a hard time and miserable and basically suffering, which is our common lot, we hypothesize the opposite of that, which is nirvana or peace, and you use it as a goal for a while and then it evaporates.
So nirvana can be here and now, and it's not something that comes later. Is that correct?
As long as you're thinking about it, it's coming later.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
First of all, nirvana is a Buddhist term, and it is Buddhist in origin. It came into China around the 4th century, and there's actually a very interesting point of Taoism where by about the 6th century or so, we see in Taoism a gradual acceptance of Buddhist concepts. So of the Taoist texts that are actually written before the 4th century, there's literally no mention of nirvana. I mean, it just didn't exist. Now, but if you look at texts after the 6th century, especially the texts of Taoism written in the 8th century, now you have lots of discussion on nirvana.
Probably because it was a social problem.
Yeah, because it was a social problem, and also because the Buddhists introduced that concept, and the Chinese found that to be very useful. And after Buddhism became what we call Sinicized, that is, become more Chinese, it became integrated in Chinese linguistics. And also, interestingly, nirvana is translated within the later Taoist text as stillness. So I find it a very interesting comparison between, Alex, what the Buddhist rendition of nirvana as peace, where in the Taoist tradition we translate it as stillness. Stillness is that which is the absence and the dissolution of mind. And whereas dissolution of mind and opening of blockages inside the physical body is nirvana or stillness. So in stillness, mind dissolves. In stillness, the energy that flows through the body, the basis of health, is unblocked. And that's what we call stillness or nirvana.
Okay.
Clearly, nirvana is a Buddhist concept. It's not an American concept. Religious humanism is primarily an American orientation. So what would be an equivalent kind of concept in religious humanism? I would say it would be happiness and a just society, here and now. Just as you would want to achieve peace or stillness here and now on this planet, so a religious humanist would try to find happiness and justice for all of society here and now. The question about an afterlife, most religious humanists take a very holistic approach to the human being and don't see the human being as containing any kind of soul or spirit or mind in the sense of some non-material substance. Most religious humanists, though there is some controversy among religious humanists over this question, think that the human being is a composite, natural and material being. There is consequently no non-material part of us that could ever go on into immortal life or ever be reincarnated again, so that at death, when our heart stops, our lungs stop, our brain stop, we die.
Well, no, okay, so you're answering both questions here. You're saying that for a religious humanist, in terms of any individual, that person dies, person whatever that is, dies and ceases to exist. Okay,
that's correct.
All right. Would you say that in terms of your philosophies and your religious belief and practice, would you say that that's how you view, say, an afterlife? Do you view it in those terms?
Well,
is there a personal afterlife, I guess is the question.
It depends on the school of Taoism you're looking at. In the particular school I come from, and my school comes from the internal alchemical school, and my lineage is of the earlier Heaven Wuqi sect of the Huashan system. In our particular system, it can be summed up as, if it's happened in the past, it's gone. Don't worry about it. Something in the future, I'm not there yet. Why worry? What's important is what we do in this lifetime.
I was interested in what... Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I would just, to clarify though, is there any significance to the concept for a Taoist of, at my death, if I've lived my life, I'm just thinking in the present moment, and at my death, in that present moment, I guess I'm thinking ahead. A Taoist would never be thinking ahead, you're telling me.
Well, what I'm saying is, does it matter?
It doesn't matter whether you survive or not, you're saying. Okay. Alex?
I was interested in John's description. I think we may actually be 180 degrees. To us, the physical world is a product of mind, so that the entire situation is merely psychological. as opposed to the psyche being a product of the material world, which is a complicated conversation.
Right.
To discuss the idea of death, it's a big subject because we're all afraid of it, because it brings about the conclusion of things that we're familiar with. Things start and stop and start and stop over and over again. So you might say, if a flower, a plant, a perennial, blooms and then dies in the winter and then it blooms again in the next spring, is that the same plant or is it a different plant or whatever? Well, we really don't know the answer to that, but the fact is that something carried through. The process repeated itself, and in that sense, that's not a bad analogy for the understanding of mind. We don't have a hypothesis about heaven and hell in terms of like an ultimate consequence.
Okay.
I don't imagine any of us have that notion that you got one shot, you're right. If you get it right, you go to eternal happiness, and if you get it wrong, you go to eternal misery.
So, in a sense, humankind is the measure of all things? Is that another way of saying it, or am I misinterpreting? Is humankind the measure of all things in a sense, then? Is that what you're saying? Or
I don't quite understand the statement.
In other words, would a plant exist, or would he exist if none of us were here? Other than, reality is just...
How would we know?
How would we know, right?
Okay.
It's like saying if a tree falls on the moon,
Well,
can you hear it?
Yeah, I'm interested in the notion here of, okay, you're here as something that I can, in a universe framework, denominate a person. Okay, it's a definition, it's a frame. To that extent, it could be called an illusion. One person's definition is another person's illusion. What I hear you saying is that for you, whether or not you're a person as that person in the next life is irrelevant. Is that right?
Not your person as that person.
Yeah. For instance, you as Alex.
Yeah.
Will you as Alex, according to your Buddhist belief system, will you exist as Alex after your corporeal body passes on?
The more important question is, will I exist as Alex now?
Okay.
In the next moment. And what is that thing that you're talking about? And are actually talking about something that exists.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So is it correct to assume that your personal value is in the moment entirely, or is there value to what I'm trying to think of our audience, and I'm trying to think of them thinking about what is my value as a person if I'm born, I live, I die, and then as far as my own personal consciousness is concerned, it's gone. What is my value as a person? And what is my value in pursuing any belief system whatsoever, or any kind of practice, any kind of religious practice, if my own personal survival is not a part of it? Okay? Anybody take that up? Maybe John, would you like to attack that? And
Sure.
we'll go to...
Sure. I think your question is very important for a religious humanist, for a Buddhist, for a Taoist. And I do want to get to it, but I would like to say something about this philosophical dispute over what comes first, mind or matter. And I would like to say that the humanist thinks of evolution when the humanist tries to answer this sort of question. And what came first in the history of the cosmos, the history of the earth? Matter came first. Life came later. Simpler forms came without mind, and then later mind evolved, probably only a couple million years ago, if we think of mind in terms of the rational mind of the human being, and then maybe a few billion years before that if we think of mind in terms of consciousness or experience with some of the other animals. But there was a time before that in evolution and the development of the cosmos where there was no mind. So the argument religious humanists would give would be that the material universe predates mind. Now, getting to this question then about the value of the person, if at death our material bodies dissolve and our identity is gone. The value that religious humanist sees in human life is the value that we give life. Do we live our lives in pursuit of a just society where men and women are treated as equals, where the white man and the non-white man are treated as equals? If so, if we live our lives in pursuit of those ideals, we can find value. I sometimes think that people who think that life has no value if there's no life after death would then have to conclude that the listening of a favorite record or something had no value once it was over. The value in experience is the value that we have while we're experiencing it.
But wouldn't you agree, I mean, and I want to get to everybody on this, wouldn't you agree that part of the value in a record once it's over is the fact that it persists as a memory? That if it didn't persist as a memory, if I had, for instance, a hippocampal, severance, and I forgot things the moment that I'd experienced them, then what would in fact be the value of playing that record? I'm wondering, what would you answer to that?
I'd like to jump in real fast, and I know Eva and Alex have something to say on this, because it reminded me of the other comment Alex made about reincarnation. He gave the example of the perennial. And it's similar to this example of the record. You can play the record over again, or you have this memory and you play it over again in your mind. And plants live, they die, and then they seem to be reborn, and they die. By analogy, then, maybe the human being is like that. However, the analogy breaks down, because when we die, as we all know, as individuals, Alex, Eva, John, Vance, Adrian, we are put into the grave, and that's it. We don't come back out of it. We can go check into the grave, and there's the body, and it's decomposed. And so we are different than the plants. If we have done something significant with our lives and fought for the issues of our time, the issues of our time today are pollution, inequality between the sexes and the races, conflict around the world. If we fought for those issues to try to seek equality and justice,
sure,
then our lives have value, and we'll be remembered for our contribution in that struggle.
Okay, Eva, what would you answer in terms of that same kind of
the afterlife and reincarnation?
Well, the idea again that many people, perhaps it's an illusion for people, but it's a very powerful one, because people care about the fact of whether they're going to persist. Well, maybe not the majority, but a vast number of people, say half the world's population, are practitioners or believers in some religion that has a personal God. I'm getting into another area, but I'll save that for later. But they believe in a religion that gives them some hope of personal survival as their discrete individual personality.
Yeah, I think that's what you've cited as a reason for many religions sprouting up, is because people are concerned with those kinds of issues. Just a very brief nutshell of what the Taoist approach on this is that the Tao is the source of energy in the universe. It gives life to all things. Humans, like us, plants, animals, even rocks, water, all have a life force in them. And we take a form. This is the shell. Eva is a shell. Andre is a shell. Alex is a shell. Everyone is a shell. This energy in us will dissipate back into the universe when this shell runs its physiological cycle and becomes biodegradable within the earth. Now, the energy that gets liberated from this particular, or this shell, is absorbed back into the universe and is recycled again into becoming a plant or an animal or a rock or another person. Now, I think this really brings up to what is the point that I think Alex was beginning to get at before this series of questions, is that when a perennial blooms again, is it the same plant or is it not the same plant? Well, when the spirit, for example, or the energy that is in me dissipates back into the universe after my physical body is gone, and it comes back as a cat, for example. I mean, is this evil or is this a cat? I think that's a mute question as far as Taoism is concerned. So this takes us into what is the goal of living in Taoism, is to contribute whatever we can in this particular mortal life, because when the energy goes back into the universe, it becomes another life form. And if we're able to cultivate both body and mind, when we shed our shell, the energy is more intact in being absorbed back into the universe. We can, as human beings, totally use up the energy that has been endowed to us by the source, the Tao, and then we'll have nothing to give back to the universe. So for us to cultivate body and mind is to live in a state where our energy, there is ample energy that would be liberated, absorbed back into the universe, and be available to another life form. It doesn't matter what life form that is. And at that point, then we truly leave without any kind of imprint, which is really the goal of Taoism, is to leave without any trace.
We leave without an imprint, but I hear you on the other hand saying the energy dissipates. Is the we in that energy also dissipating? Is the we-ness, or is the you-ness of you dissipating? Is that organization of your own?
This physical shell, together with the energy, the physical shell and the energy form our personality. When the shell goes, the energy is personless. It gets liberated and it can be used again. So, in a sense, the we-ness doesn't really make sense, because when we go, the body is gone. What are we? Are we the body or are we the energy? We're both. We're not the energy itself, and we're not the body itself. It takes two to make the we. And therefore, we say in Taoism is that one illusion is to think about the we as a very permanent thing, is that it persists.
Well, maybe I can come back, to you with this question that I'm going to pose to Alex, and that is, who is it then that is living the life? That is being lived within that shell? Is that even a significant question in terms of saying, who am I? Who are you? Or as the Greeks, know thyself. In a sense, it says that it's only temporary. It sounds like you're saying it's only temporarily relevant, and that after the shell dissipates, who I was is maybe only significant in the sense that perhaps I will have symbolized one of the ideals, according to what you were saying earlier. But let me let you ruminate on that. And Alex, maybe could you address that?
Yeah, the issue of a self, from our perspective, is a self is totally illusory. And it is the source of suffering. So, which is more important in a sense than saying the self is illusory. So, we have a situation which is essentially impermanent. Therefore, it's unsatisfactory. I say it's impermanent because we're going to die. If our parents are going to die, our children are going to die, whatever situation we're in is going to end, whatever situation we would like to be in might never happen. There's a constant source of dissatisfaction, which is unhappiness, and we all recognize that our lot is old age, sickness, and death. Then you begin to look to see what is the source of this particular problem. And our term for that source is ego clinging, clinging to the illusion of a self. So, I'm a lawyer. If I derive an identity from the fact that I'm a lawyer, I cling to that particular description of myself, or for that matter, I have brown eyes, or I'm, I can sing, or any of those particular qualities that you have, as you cling to those, they will fall away, and that will result in suffering and unhappiness for yourself. So the first step in Buddhism is to realize that that is the nature of the self that we're trying to preserve. That we're so worried about carrying into the future and into the afterlife and all this sort of stuff, which is the source of suffering.
Christianity says that you can't be moral or ethical unless you believe in a deity. So where does evil and goodness fit in your philosophies or religion?
Well, in the absence of a deity, the deity gives you somebody who's a judge, to my mind. I mean, that's the concept there, is the deity can say this is evil, this is good, and you have a judge which absolves you of responsibility. All you have to do is follow the rules. To me, that's not ethical. That's not an ethic in itself. The more genuine ethic is, our ethic derives from working with one's own mind, cutting through one's tendency towards self-centeredness and egotism, which naturally results in a different relationship with the world that we describe as compassion.
You know, I want to play devil's advocate here for just a moment, because what I hear you saying is, you know, there's almost a certain ease-seeking in looking at a deity in order to follow the rules, and yet would you not say that there are certain practices or certain kinds of tenets or things that you would adhere to in order to live a life that is qualitatively better versus one that would not meet the ideals of your religious philosophy?
Boy, there are so many questions and ideas. I want to keep track of them. They're so good. This discussion about who we are is a very interesting and important question. And religious humanists are going to disagree on this. I'm stating my position. And my position is that we are our bodies. And it's different from these two positions. Now, when I say we are our bodies only up to a certain point. Ultimately, we are the universe itself. The universe reflects itself in us through the process of evolution, through the process of birth and life. But each one of us represents a certain specific expression of the universe for our given 70, 80 years here on the planet. Going back to Eva's comment about energy, what is the energy left over after our cells, our bodies die? Well, if you're cremated, your energy is your ashes. And if you are buried, your energy left over is your set of bones. Now, I know this isn't overly comforting, but Sigmund Freud, who was a humanist in Europe in the 20th century, said we just need to grow up. And we don't like to hear that. We like to think we're totally responsible. But perhaps one of our problems in America is we're not responsible. And if we think we're going to live forever or go to heaven or be reincarnated again, maybe we neglect our responsibilities to take care of the pressing social issues. And I think Buddhists and Taoists and humanists would all agree that these metaphysical questions, as interesting as they are, is not the heart of our philosophy and religion. The heart of our philosophy and religion is our social, political, ethical practices. Would you agree with that?
Well, I'd like to address the point of whether can you actually have a set of ethics and values without a deity. Certainly with Taoism, our ideals are founded on three ideals: wisdom, virtue, and compassion. So even without any deity, we have those ideals to follow. Mm-hmm. And very much like what Alex was saying about having a deity is a means, just a way of people to say, okay, if I didn't do this, or if I did this, it would be labeled as evil or good. We see as a major function of deities is to provide some form of hold for people to believe that, well, if they did something, quote, wrong, they'd be punished. So a lot of what a deity serves in its function is simply to be a judge, but more than just simply saying, giving us the measuring rules, saying, well, this is good and this is bad, or this is kind, or this is cruel, is to really more of like, will I be punished for this or not? Now, within Taoism, there's no such thing as will I be punished if I did this. There won't be. If it's going to be punishment, it's by law. It's by justice. However, the important thing for us is to have a set of values where we can make ourselves to be rid of the ego, as you will call it, but we call it the knowledge God, part of our mind that clings, that grabs, because if we grab, we're greedy. If we're greedy, we'll tend to become mean, and when we become mean, we'll tend to become cruel, and all the harmful things will follow. And by eradicating at the source of this knowledge God that plays tricks on us, that encourages us to cling and to be greedy, we are getting at the root of values, because ethics all come, values and ethics all come from going or dissolving the clinging and also dissolving the desire in us.
Okay.
No, the question of reincarnation came up, and do any of you believe in reincarnation? As you know, and you mentioned that you can this spirit or this whatever is left. John mentioned something about the ashes as was left. I don't think that's what you meant. It's not the material. It's a spirit or something that's left that goes into something else. But there's a thing called karma. Do you believe in karma? And
I think karma is a Buddhist term.
Yes.
I don't know if you use it or not.
It depends on the school of Taoism.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe that there's
I
something,
mean, I know it's a Buddhist term.
Yes.
I don't know if it's a Taoist term.
It might
if you don't
originally be
believe
Hindu.
that there's something of your previous existence carried forth, then what does? I thought karma meant that you pay for it in the next life. So
Karma means you pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when that happens is, we'll find out. It's very, I mean, in a sense, it's a very simple concept with an exotic name, which is, it's a way of saying cause and effect exists.
So that replaces the God punishment factor in a sense, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, which is the fact that aggression breeds an aggressive response, passion breeds a passionate response, and so forth, I mean, in simplistic terms. But whatever you do defines the scope of your experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, this brings up another idea for me. I didn't want to drop the ball with the idea of what we were saying with rules before, because it seems like what each of you are saying. On the one hand, you're saying those that follow a deity are looking to that deity for rules, and they want to follow the rules. In a sense, what I hear each of you saying in your own way, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd like to throw out the concept that you're talking about rules as something to be discovered. You're talking about living through life, and that you're really living through life trying to find out what the rules are. Now, a question that lags in my mind is, rules, aside from a rule maker, is a pure abstraction of human thought. We don't know any such thing as a concept of a rule.
I think it would be incorrect to call our ideals as rules, because from the Taoist point of view, and I think that from the Buddhist point of view, Alex, is that we see them as pathways. Pathway is not a rule. Certainly there are some rules within a pathway. Discipline, for example, we don't call them rules. Mm-hmm. Discipline are guidelines for everyday life. So very simple guidelines of not stealing, not robbing, not killing. Those are very, very simple guidelines. But we don't really call them that's the rules, because in a pathway, it's not only just ethics, not only just values. It's a way of looking at the universe. It's a way of looking at ourselves. It's a way of interacting with other people. So I think that's why the idea of karma. I really liked your idea of karma, Alex, because the idea that we breed what we initiate. And it is very true that if we're aggressive first, we will elicit aggressive behavior towards us. And this is something that is very common in interpersonal interaction types of situations.
I need a clarification. Are you saying that karma is what happens to you here and now as a
the boundary between life and death is not such an important concept there. The more important concept is, in this light, is transcendent. And so we focus on being particularly attracted to continuing to live. Death becomes a bigger and bigger obstacle or something like that, so we get very curious about what's on the other side of it. But if you work with, part of our practice in some sense is working with the notion of impermanence, that death happens repeatedly during the course of one's life. And so the fear of becomes dissipated as you work with it. And so the notion of what happens, death loses the capital D, if you know what I mean.
It's just one of many experiences.
Exactly. And not such a source of fear, because life isn't such a source of, it's not something that becomes, you're not clinging to it so much. The whole thing is transparent in a sense. With virtues, we do have the notion of transcendent virtues. Rules and things like that, yes, wisdom, discipline, exertion, all of these are perceived of as transcendent virtues, but we know that that's true because others have accomplished that. And it's something that we hope to bring into our own, to discover, not through rule-making, but actually through the practice of understanding our minds and ourselves. And so that the issue is not to act good, the issue is to bring yourself into an understanding and into a unification with transcendent virtue.
I think it's
if I may, I'd like to just break in now. We need to tell our viewers the address that they can write to and call to find the program, to comment on the program. Program is Spiritual Spectrum. It's write to 2351 Ogden Street, Denver, Colorado, 80205. That's at 303-861-1186. That's the phone number to call. Okay, getting back to your point, Eva.
Yes, I'd like to just comment a little bit on the idea of rules and virtues and discipline, is that we see them, again, as means. By adopting disciplines, by adopting virtues, acting virtuously, we're working towards the dissolution of attachment. That's what it is. So, at least from a Taoist point of view, we don't see the ethics, the virtues, as the end goal. They're really means. The end goal is non-attachment to objects. And disciplines, having virtues as guidelines, as rules, will help us to do it.
Would you say then that in context of all that we've talked about, because we are getting close to the end of our program, are you saying then that one of the high ideals of Taoism is the achievement of a sense of inner stillness, and that one does this by adopting certain disciplines, and part of that discipline is losing an attachment for the world that one lives in? Are there other aspects that you would say are key aspects of that discipline?
Well, actually, let me just correct this a little bit.
Please do.
We can say there's a goal in Taoism, and again, that's actually not a very accurate description of there's goal in Taoism. The goal is to be enlightened. Enlightenment means non-attachment. Non-attachment is through stillness. Stillness itself is cultivated through virtues, through action, through disciplines, through physical practices, through mental practices such as meditation.
Okay.
And, of course, with enlightenment is the motivation to help others to achieve the same enlightenment.
Okay. Is there a goal to religious humanism? And I'd ask you to Be brief.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on your question about these moral rules. What is the origin of them? You're absolutely right, conceptually speaking. A rule implies a rule giver. The rule giver is the human community working together. Humanists understand moral rules as rules that we have created as human beings to help us survive and live together. The virtues of friendliness, the virtues of justice are some of the virtues of the humanist. And those are our goals in life.
Super. And Alex, what would be the acme of Buddhist living?
No goal, which is non-theism.
Okay. No goal, which is non-theism. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you all. Vance, do you have any final...
I just would hope that today's program gets people out there in our American audience to realize that there are people that are different from you, and hopefully that even though they are different, we have a lot of common concerns and everything. For example, Eva mentioned virtues such as not killing and being good to each other and so forth. So I think we'll find that even though we have some differences, we have a lot in common.
Absolutely. I guess what I get out of this is that there is a prominent place for morality and for virtuous living, that there is a virtuous life to be lived in a non-theistic religion. Mm-hmm. And I thank you all for joining us here. Please come and join us here the next time when we explore the universe and spiritual spectrum. Thanks a lot. Thank you.